They thought it was just another routine traffic stop to officers, confident in their authority, ready to assert control. But what they didn't know, the man behind the wheel wasn't just any driver. He was their soon-to-be boss, the new chief of police. And this stop was about to turn their world upside down. Logan Carter never cared for theatrics. He led by example, proving his worth through action rather than words. After years of relentless dedication and climbing the ranks, today was a defining moment, his first day as chief of police in the rapidly expanding city of Brookhaven. It was a position he had fought tooth and nail for, breaking barriers that tried to keep him out. The system hadn't been built for someone like him, but Logan had never let obstacles stand in his way. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Logan Carter drove down the winding highway leading into the city, the early morning sun casting a golden hue over the horizon. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. This was supposed to be a day of accomplishment, but he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Brookhaven wasn't just any city. It had a reputation known for its deeply entrenched old-school law enforcement culture. The police department had long been plagued by allegations of bias, particularly against outsiders. Logan had read the reports, heard the whispers. Many officers had already expressed their dissatisfaction with his appointment, a man who had spent years challenging corruption, now stepping in as their chief. But Logan had never been one to back down. As he approached an intersection where the light was just about to turn red, a sudden flash of blue and red lights filled his rearview mirror. A patrol car pulled up behind him, sirens blaring. His pulse remained steady, but his instincts were sharp. This wasn't random. Easing his car onto the shoulder, he listened as the tires crunched against the gravel. Two officers, both looking like they'd stepped out of an old-school precinct poster, climbed out of the vehicle. The senior officer, a stocky man in his late 40s, approached with a slow, deliberate stride. His younger partner followed close behind, his posture rigid, his expression taut with skepticism. Logan lowered his window, keeping his expression neutral. The older officer leaned in slightly, his gaze scanning the car before settling on Logan. "License and registration," he said flatly, his tone carrying a level of authority that felt just a little too rehearsed. Logan reached into his glove compartment, pulling out the documents without a word. He had learned long ago that, in situations like this, silence was often the best strategy. As he handed them over, the senior officer's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. The younger officer, however, wasn't as restrained. "What brings you out here?" he asked, his tone edged with suspicion. "This area isn't exactly the safest, if you know what I mean." Logan felt his stomach tighten, but his expression remained unreadable. "I'm on my way to work, and where exactly would that be?" The younger officer pressed, leaning in a little closer. His smirk suggested he already had assumptions about Logan. Logan hesitated for a moment. He could reveal his position right then and there, end this entire charade with a few words. But something told him to hold back. He had been in this situation before too many times. The power dynamic here was undeniable, and he wasn't about to start his first day by calling out the very officers he was about to lead. "You'll find out soon enough," he responded calmly, locking eyes with the younger officer. There was no anger in his voice, but his tone made it clear he wasn't intimidated. The senior officer, sensing the shift in the air, stepped in. "Let's not make this difficult, sir. We can take this further if need be." There it was, the veiled threat, the subtle flex of authority. Logan felt his patience thinning. He had endured this kind of treatment for years: condescension, disrespect, the quiet assumption that he didn't belong. He had fought too hard, climbed too high, to let this slide. Taking a steady breath, Logan decided he had played along long enough. "That won't be necessary," Logan said firmly. "I'm Chief Logan Carter. I suggest you rethink how you're handling this situation." The shift in the air was immediate. Both officers froze. The senior officer blinked in confusion, his brows furrowing as realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The younger officer's smug expression vanished, replaced with shock and a hint of panic. "You're the chief," the senior officer stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Yes," Logan said, his voice unwavering. "And I'd like to know exactly why I was stopped and why this line of questioning even happened." For a moment, neither officer spoke. The younger one fumbled with his words, scrambling for an excuse, but the damage was already done. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. The senior officer cleared his throat, struggling to regain composure. "There must have been a misunderstanding." Logan didn't let him finish. "No, this isn't a misunderstanding," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "This is exactly the problem. You stop people like me without cause, make assumptions, and try to flex your authority because you think you can get away with it." The senior officer opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He knew Logan was right. Logan's calm, unflinching demeanor only made their behavior look worse. "You see," he continued, his eyes locked onto theirs, "it's officers like you who make people distrust the system. And it's people like me who are here to change that." Both officers stood in silence, their faces drained of color. Logan could feel the weight of the moment sinking in. This wasn't just about him. This was about every person who had been unjustly stopped, questioned, and harassed because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of who belonged in certain spaces. He stepped out of the car, standing tall as he addressed them. "You'll be reporting to me personally for the next few weeks. I'll be reviewing every traffic stop you make, and I suggest you think long and hard about how you handle yourselves from now on." The senior officer finally found his voice. We didn't mean any disrespect, Chief. It won't happen again." Logan nodded, though he knew the words were hollow. It would happen again, not with these two, perhaps, but with others. That's why he was here to root out the deep-seated prejudice that had plagued Brookhaven's police force for far too long. "Good," he said quietly, before turning back to his car. As he drove away, Logan allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had won this round, but there would be many more battles ahead. His position as chief of police was more than just a title. It was a responsibility to make sure that no one else had to endure what he had just experienced. Later that day, Logan gathered the department for his first meeting. The tension in the room was thick as he stood in front of the officers, his presence commanding the attention of everyone present. He recounted the events of that morning, leaving no detail unspoken. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," he began, his voice steady. "But I am here to make it clear that this kind of behavior stops now. Every officer in this department will be held accountable for how they treat the citizens of Brookhaven regardless of their race, gender, or background." A murmur of unease swept through the room, but Logan didn't flinch. He had spent his life fighting for justice, and he wasn't about to stop now. "This is your chance to prove that you are the kind of officers who serve with integrity," he continued. "But know this: I will not tolerate bias. I will not tolerate disrespect. And I will not tolerate anyone who thinks they are above the law." His words echoed in the silent room. Some officers shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded in quiet agreement. Logan could tell who was ready to stand with him and who wasn't. But that didn't matter. He was ready for the challenge. Over the coming weeks, word of Logan's encounter spread through the community. For some, it was a sign that change was finally coming. For others, it was a wake-up call. The media caught wind of the story, and soon, Logan became a symbol of what Brookhaven needed: someone unafraid to stand up to injustice. Someone determined to reform a broken system. But Logan knew this was only the beginning. There was still so much work to be done. Every stop, every encounter, every decision. It would all be scrutinized, but he was ready. After all, he hadn't fought all these years to stay silent now. The fight for justice was far from over. But in that moment, driving away from those two humbled officers, Logan knew one thing for certain: he was exactly where he needed to be.